we put these calls together. This will be the first one in a series that we want to launch in order to build the conversation around sustainability in the camp community. There's a lot of interest that we've learned about through our outreach efforts, and feel like this could be a good platform to kind of inspire conversation, get folks involved, meet other camp and sustainability professionals who are interested in this topic, so that we can all work together to kind of push this agenda forward for sustainability in the camp movement. So we will start with just some housekeeping notes to keep us on track as we move through the meeting. First thing, everyone's been muted by default, so we won't be disturbed by folks as they come in and join us. Also those background noises, I'm sure as a lot of folks are working remotely these days, we might have some background things going on, kids running around, dogs barking and things like that. So please do keep those muted unless you're actively speaking. Since we do have so many folks that will be joining us, we're looking at ways in which we can kind of keep things moderated so that we won't be stepping on top of each other as we speak. So what I'd like to try is that when you do want to share, so if you have a comment, a question, or just something to share with the group, please start by typing it into a short message into the chat box. If you can't locate your chat box, you should be able to look through your menu on the Zoom call to be able to enter that in there. If you're just joining us by phone, if you find a time, if you can't chat in there, then just kind of jump in there when you see an appropriate time. But let's try to keep those messages in the chat box so we can keep everybody organized and move forward. When you're acknowledged, click the microphone to unmute yourself and share whatever you have to share. Please do keep your questions and comments to the point to make the most of our time together. Our call is scheduled for an hour, so we want to make the most of that time. If at the end of that hour, we'll kind of do a wrap up and kind of quick debrief. And if there are more questions and comments and the conversation needs to continue, we can definitely continue this meeting a little bit past that time. Again, please do mute your microphone when you're not speaking. And finally, when you are speaking, we'll definitely encourage you to share your screen and see your smiling faces as we move forward there. All right. So a quick overview of our meeting agenda. I'd like to start with an audience poll. We do have two speakers that will be joining us. Paul Anderson is an architect at Partners in Cerny Architects, and Anna Maria DeCipris and Lucian Toma are permaculture experts and have a lot of different areas that they focus on, but one of their things is about and for sustainability. As we go through those speakers, again, please add those questions in to the chat box so that we can access those and kind of follow up with your questions as we go. And then we'll also open the forum up for you to share about sustainability successes and challenges at your camp or organization that you're with. And then closing, we'd like to discuss what topics you'd like to dive into deeper into future calls. And as well as what you can be doing right now to prepare for modeling sustainability this summer with a call to action that we'll be sharing with everyone. So just briefly, I want to kind of provide an overview of green camps and kind of our approach to sustainability and the work that we've been doing for the past 5 years or so. When I work with camp professionals and I go in and do presentations, I often start by saying we can all agree that sustainability is important, but what does it mean and what does it look like? So sustainability, to me, it's really about decisions and the way in which we make our decisions. So this chart on the side here kind of breaks it down into the triple bottom line, which I think is a great, really simple way to overview and highlight some of the important aspects of sustainability. So we can break that down into people, planet, and profit. So when we make a decision, we often kind of fall down into the area of making decisions based on the bottom line. So how much is this going to cost us? How much is this going to save us? And that's understandable. We all, as camp owners, directors, staff members, we want to make sure that our camps are successful so that they are able to continue their operations to provide great experiences for the youth and adults that they're serving. However, I think it's important to be able to take a step back and when we make these decisions, not only incorporate the bottom line, but also look at the impact of the planet and then as well the social impact. And specifically with green camps, we really look at the educational approach. So how can we model sustainability in a way that's going to inspire green behavior change to educate our campers? And we can do that by implementing practical examples of sustainability so that we can leverage those as educational tools. And our approach, over the years, we've developed a lot of different tools and research sources, and in the goal of trying to understand how can we help any camp access the benefits of sustainability. We did start with an accreditation program, which is still exciting and something that we hope to pursue in the future, but really wanted to simplify it down into some simple steps that camps can take. And so these are the 5 steps that we recommend camps to pursue, or any organization for that matter, starting with creating a green team. By creating a green team, we're going to bring together the key stakeholders. So that could be campers and staff and executive directors and board members and even community members that are active or supportive of your camp organization, to come together and have a conversation, kind of like what we're doing right now, just to sit down around the table to discuss, what does sustainability mean to us? How does it fit within our mission and goals of our organization? The following steps, from creating conservation policies, implementing and conducting audit surveys to help gather data and information, and then implementing green actions, putting proposals together to implement some different sustainable actions to put your team to the test and put those into place. And then finally is sharing. I think sharing is really important. We can share our successes and challenges. And that's a lot about what this conversation is going to be about as well. Sharing ideas, sharing challenges and successes of what sustainability has done for your organization. I will share a link. We were published in the ACA Camping magazine in the March-April edition. And so there's an article that really outlines what these 5 steps look like. And I can share that link to give you some further information to that. But I don't want to dive any deeper into that. And I'd like to go ahead and switch gears a little bit. Again, we have 2 presenters that are joining us. And first off, let's see, Paul, if you go ahead and unmute yourself. Are you with us? Paul Anderson. Paul? So I saw that Paul signed in there. All right, well, let's see. Maybe we'll give Paul a second to get his things in a row. Anna Maria, are you with us?
Yes, here we are.
Awesome, cool. I'm gonna, I'll let you do your introduction. I'll go ahead and, you said you wanted me to show your website, so I can put that on there, but I'll let you take it away.
Great, thank you.
We can also share that.
Yeah, so good morning, everyone. My name is Anna Maria, and I have my partner here, Lucian. We are out here at our farm in Anza, California. We're very excited to be here with you this morning. I have worked in the camp industry before. I was a director of a life sciences program and ran an orchard and a garden for Boy Scout camp here in Southern California. And my path has taken me now into permaculture education, as well as beekeeping and herbalism. And my partner also is a permaculture educator. So we're very excited to kind of bring these bridges together with the camping community, as we believe that permaculture is a beautiful platform to share with only camp staff, camp attendees. And I'm going to let Lucian share a little bit about how our work is perfect for the camp community.
Beautiful. Good morning, everyone. So I did this presentation at the last camp meeting, I would call it, where there were conference. There were quite a lot of camp directors, and the premises of the presentation and the type of work that we do is that permaculture can be integrated to help camps improve their ecosystems, their nature, to engage people, and it also can be used as an educational tool to engage all the camp goers time after time after time. We believe that connecting with nature and in a way that we work with her to provide food, water conservation, biodiversity growing, just conservation of resources in general while providing lots of abundance. So as you can see, this is our website here. We're committed to inspire, empower, and support sustainability. We both teach permaculture design at the college level and at our farm here. We also have a homestead in a suburban environment. Our farm is about 40 acres. We do courses here where we have between 15 and 25 different professionals, people that either something happened. Somebody needs to mute themselves. Okay, now it works. So we have different professionals that come here, between 15 and 25 people. Usually they are leaders of different type of communities or spaces, and they basically learn how to redesign their spaces to provide for human needs while also healing ecosystems. So we've actually had a lot of school directors that and school professionals that came to learn about designing these spaces, and it's a lot of practice with design, and we do a little bit of hands-on too. So we have a secondary program where we bring people in to learn beyond design to actually implement the systems we're talking about. So I think the simplest, if you wanted Danny to click on courses. Okay, and if you want to just scroll down to the first course. Okay, so this is basically what permaculture is about. You know, it's about teaching practical knowledge and skills and practice with a focus on regenerative and sustainable homesteading, consulting services, entrepreneurship, community building, and small-scale farming. So we believe that, for example, in the case of camps, permaculture can definitely include this type of systems for the camp, not only to do it in a way to grow food, for example, and to conserve water, conserve energy, conserve staff time, build biodiversity for people to be engaged with, and it can be it can be done in a way where everybody has something to do and something to learn. With that said, I just wanted to share one small system that could fit to any kind of camp community, any kind of camp location. The idea of a food forest. So it is exactly what it sounds like. There's a beautiful video, and we can share the link, or if anybody Googles Jeff Lawton food forest, that video can be found really easily. The concept of food forest is that, campsites have a lot of space, maybe a lot of space that's not being utilized for anything really. And a food forest is exactly what it sounds. It's a forest full of food. It could be designed in a way with fruit trees and fruit shrubs, all kind of cheese, all kind of plants that create a forest, exactly how a forest works, where it's self-sustaining, where once you put it in place and you design it right, with how the water flows through it, even without irrigation. You can start it with irrigation, but in time you can put the specific type of species in place and move soil in a specific way that the forest itself, the food forest itself, is using only available rain in that area, and is producing an abundance of food, medicine, all kind of culinary and medicinal plants. So that is kind of like possibly by watching a video about food forest or looking into it a little bit, that is one of the best way to exemplify permaculture. So using a space that the farm is not using, is not doing anything with it, to put a thing in place, to put a system in place that produces something for the camp. And, you know, once kick started, it could engage the camp goers, the camp people, to come year after year to see the development of this forest. And in time, possibly between 3 to 6 years, this system is starting to work by itself without too much human intervention besides harvesting. I guess this is all we can share right now. There's quite a lot to talk about permaculture, but again, it's a system that puts you know, food producing, medicine producing, resource conserving elements in place that can engage the camp community over and over and over again. So I'm not sure if there's anything else I can say beyond here. It's you know, people, both the camp directors and the camp staff can learn how to design and how to manage a system like this to get a kick started. And then the camp community can basically become these people that want to come all the time to see what they put in place and how it's evolving. So thank you.
Awesome. Ana Maria and Lucian, thank you so much for sharing all that information. You know, I think the food forest concept is really fascinating. I know that, you know, Lucian presented at CodaCon. So Green Camps came in with several other presenters to lead a sustainability track at the pre-conference for the National ACA conference. And to understand like all the ideas and opportunities, I think the food forest kind of really serves a good model of what sustainability looks like. I think gardening in general is a really strong example to pull ideas from what sustainability really looks like and means into a practical application. Lucian, if you want to go ahead and share that link in the chat box, we can share that link as well after the conference to get folks some more resources about that. The video you shared is really awesome, and what a cool opportunity. I think, again, you know, looking at all these different opportunities around sustainability can be a little bit overwhelming, but would definitely encourage camps as you form your green teams and look through all these opportunities and see like what makes most sense for us, what could be a really good opportunity for us to highlight sustainability. And that food forest could be a really cool opportunity. So I just saw that link come through, so thanks for sharing that. And again, would also like to encourage folks, if you have questions about food forest, about permaculture design, the work that Ana Maria and Lucian are doing, please feel free to put those questions in the box there. So I just was in touch with Paul. It sounds like he had some technical difficulties, but are you with us now, Paul?
Can you hear me?
I gotcha. Awesome. Thanks for joining us. Paul was another presenter at the CodaCon conference. Is how we came in contact, and excited to have you on board and for you to share a few things about sustainability in the camp community with us.
Yeah, thanks. Hello, everyone. Sorry for the inconvenience I caused with my phone here. Actually, I'm with, I used to be with Partners in Cerny. I'm now with Alliance Architects in Minneapolis, ALLIIANCE, 2 I's. I have been involved with sustainable camp design, environmental education centers, interpretive centers, visitor centers, camps, those kind of facilities for close to 25 years. So I'm really excited about. Also on my volunteer side, I've been on the board of directors of the International Wolf Center for about 30 years, and on the advisory board of the Listening Point Foundation here in Minnesota. I was just going to go over kind of a broad overview of sustainable design, you know, why it's important and what are some things we can do. and then I understand we'll open it up for questions and answers. Hopefully, can really focus on what you want to talk about. I always am led by a quote by Aldo Leopold. I think it really pertains to sustainable design and sums it up. He said, "A thing is right when it tends to preserve the integrity, stability, and beauty of the biotic community. It is wrong when it tends otherwise." I think it's good words to live by. We can deal with sustainability, or sustainability breaks down in my mind to site design, water efficiency, energy and atmosphere, materials and resources, and indoor environmental quality. Those are also lead categories, if you're familiar with LEED, L-E-E-D. We can reduce carbon emissions and climate change through energy use. Sustainability can really add to creating a sense of place for the campers, both at a visceral level and a cognitive level. Also, campers will learn from a model of sustainability and have kind of a multiplier effect, so they can go back into their homes and communities and friends and share these ideas. There's economical benefits to sustainable design with sustainable energy use, landscaping, irrigation, that type of thing. And of course, there's increased health and wellness through indoor air quality and views, daylighting, that type of thing. Maybe I'll just talk about a few strategies in those different categories that I mentioned. I'll go over them really quickly. I gave a talk on this at the last CODACON, and I don't know if many of you were involved with that. I won't go to that depth, but just kind of skim over on a larger overview. With sites, sustainable sites, we can certainly use silt fencing, for erosion control, sedimentation control with the waters. Usually camps are located on water and we don't want erosion to adversely affect the water quality. So using good silt fencing, temporary seeding, that kind of thing. Reducing the site disturbance. Oftentimes your camps are located in beautiful areas, and we certainly don't want to downgrade any sites by what we design. So having it harmonious, having a site design harmonious with the landscape and existing context is essential. Just by really talking through, when you're contemplating a project, talking through what the program is of that project, and can there be multiple shared functions, for instance? So the size of the impact on the site, the size of the building can be reduced, and also just the cost of the building. So really looking, being diligent to look at opportunities to reduce the size of the building through shared functions, and if it's not shared functions, really understanding what the program is or what's needed. Using a previously impacted site, if that's possible, where an older building is torn down or that type of thing, that reduces new impact on the site. Stormwater management, we talked about a bit, things like rain gardens, pervious concrete, bioswales, that type of thing. Alternative transportation can also reduce site impact, encouraging carpooling. I know in camps, a lot of times campers come in groups on buses, that kind of thing, but any way that can be reduced. Really, parking can take such a big part of a site and have such an impact both visually and physically on a site. go through a couple things here. Water, skipping now from site to water use. 12% of potable water use in the United States is through building use. So that can be reduced by using native vegetation to your camp. You don't need additional irrigation, that type of thing, typically when you use native vegetation, just because it's well suited for that application. Simple things like low flow or waterless plumbing fixtures. Again, using native plantings that don't require irrigation. Occupancy sensing faucets, that type of thing. And then the third category is energy and atmosphere. The issue is 62% of the total U.S. buildings use 62% of the total U.S. electricity consumption, and 36% of the primary energy use in the United States, and contribute to 30% of the total U.S. greenhouse gas emissions. So energy has a large impact, especially on climate change. Things that can be done also by reducing energy certainly saves your operating costs, if depending on heating and or cooling. But starting with an efficient or highly efficient envelope with good insulation on the walls, roof, windows, that type of thing. Commissioning, when you do build a building and the mechanical equipment has been installed properly and everything, it can be optimized through building commissioning. Have a commissioning agent come to the building and look at how everything is put together, and then fine-tune it for optimal optimization, and it really makes a difference on energy usage. Consider renewable energy, passive solar energy, daylight harvesting. If you have a lot of windows, just because it's a camp and you want to have a strong indoor-outdoor relationship, you can use those windows to help you in a number of ways, either with passive solar energy gain, daylight harvesting. Operable windows would create natural ventilation. So it's a lot of ways. A properly placed window can do so many things. Consider biomass heating. Then, of course, there's other renewables, solar, electric, and wind, and geothermal. High efficiency HVAC equipment, certainly. Kind of going fast over these. The next category is materials and resources. The issue there is construction and demolition waste in the United States contributes 136 million tons of waste. That's the equivalent of about 3 pounds per person per day. So there's ways to reduce that. One is to have the contractor develop, following specifications, construction waste management plan. So construction waste is recycled or reused to the greatest extent possible. Using rapidly renewable materials such as biofiber composite board. We've used board, it kind of looks like particle board, but made from sunflower hulls or wheat. Bamboo is rapidly renewable. And there's a material called tectum that is made with components of seaweed, and that's a wonderful, wonderful material as well. Things like expressing structure reduces the number of materials you need. If you express the roof beams, for instance, or roof trusses, you save the cost of a ceiling. Or if you stain or polish a concrete floor instead of putting tile over, for instance, that's a way to reduce material use, and it has economic benefits. Using a lower grade of wood, one that shows maybe more knots, that type of thing. You're not paying as much for the wood that way, and it has a lot of character, and maybe people can relate to it a little bit more and make the connection to trees. Using materials that are manufactured and harvested locally saves on cost because of transportation costs, and it helps with that sense of place, kind of that cognitive and visceral sense of place. And of course, using materials with recycled content. And the second to last category is indoor environmental quality. Just maximizing daylight and views to have that also helps a sense of place, just so you're constantly have that indoor-outdoor relationship. And using through daylight harvesting, operable windows helps with that indoor-outdoor relationship. And then other things like using low-emitting materials with paint and adhesives and joint sealants really contributes to wellness in the buildings we use. And then the last category I just wanted to touch briefly on is innovation and design that LEED recognizes, but we can also use in the design any building that wants to be, or where we're trying to increase or maximize sustainable strategies, even if not seeking LEED certification. Using a timeless design for the context helps to, as opposed to something that's trendy, that might need to be remodeled due to aesthetic trends in the future. Kind of thinking timeless design, timeless camp design. There's definitely precedent for that. Using low maintenance and durable materials. I think a big one that we've done a lot is we touched on it earlier, is sharing, educating people about the sustainable strategies that are used. And that can be very simple, to just placards near a strategy. Maybe there's an exhibit that's kind of a central exhibit, and then these little orbit exhibits around to remind people as they're using the building, just little things pointed out here and there. Well, that's a real quick overview over what we can do. I hope I didn't lose you too much on that. I'd be happy to answer any specific questions you have or better describe what I've been talking about.
Awesome. Well, Paul, thank you so much for sharing all that. I think that can bring up a lot of conversation. You gave a lot of really good ideas. I love the LEED certification program. I think it provides a good baseline of all the checklists that we can look at in our building designs and operations to kind of help meet that baseline for best practices and sustainability. For those folks that have joined us during those conversations, we welcome you to share any questions and information that you'd like to add to the conversation. So it looks like Jared had a question. Jared, do you want to hop on and introduce yourself and share your question with everyone?
Sure. Hey, I'm Jared Ryder from Camp Towanda. Actually moved up here from New York City yesterday, so I'm out of that. Yeah, so I thought all that was great, and we obviously do a lot of construction and demolition at camp. A lot of it's in-house, and definitely going to try to set up some protocols for that. And I was wondering if anyone has any thing written down or things that they can share that can, that I could, use to formulate something.
This is Paul. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
One thing, as I mentioned earlier, a construction waste management plan where you set goals. Now you're saying you're in-house. Do you want to adapt it instead of giving it to a contractor? You use it in-house. A couple of different things. Danny was talking about LEED. That's leadership and energy and environmental design. it's run by the U.S. Green Building Council, or USGBC. You could check their website and then go to the area on construction waste. I could share a construction waste specification with you, but it would also be looking for, you know, it's tough 15 years ago to find companies that actually recycled construction waste, you know, things like sheetrock and those kind of materials, tile, that kind of thing. Now there's quite a few companies. It's kind of created a need for those kind of companies. So you could check in your area for maybe with dumpster companies. They could maybe help focus on companies that practice recycled waste. So you would just have to bring a dumpster from one of those companies, have it on site, fill it up, and then they would take it and recycle it. And you would have a story to tell. They would give you tickets, dump tickets on where that went, how much it was, how much weight it was. So just good information to share with your campers.
Yeah, absolutely, Paul. I think that's great that you highlight kind of the ability to share that. As we mentioned, you know, sharing this stuff is that's the point of it, right? To be able to inspire our campers, to give them models of what sustainability looks like in a practical, real world application there. So I love that. I shared a link, earth911.com. I believe it's .com. You can search by zip code for whatever materials you're trying to have properly disposed of, and they'll find companies and other centers that you can send those items to. It's kind of a cool resource for that as well. Awesome. So again, please go ahead and type in any other questions. I'd also love to invite folks to just introduce themselves, to tell us about your camp, where you're at, any successes that you've had in sustainability at your organization, any challenges and things like that as well. So while we're waiting to get some more questions in, Paul, I have a question for you about the LEED certification process. We focus on encouraging camps to form green teams and come together around the table to have a conversation to understand what the low-hanging fruits or best opportunities are for pursuing sustainability. Can you talk a little bit about that process in LEED certification? I understand that, you know, the checklist of different items that you're trying to check off. Do you have any experiences or thoughts on how we can translate that process into camps kind of pursuing those best practices?
Well, if you want to have your camp LEED certified.
Well, and not necessarily going after the certification, but kind of modeling kind of that approach in, you know, my understanding is the typical kind of building approach is very isolated. So you have your architects and your plumbers and your landscape folks work in isolation, whereas LEED certification focuses on bringing everyone to the table, having their voices heard so that you can integrate those different systems into each other.
Yeah, you could actually go on the LEED website, get there through usgbc.com, and even if you're not wanting to, Danny mentioned, if you're not necessarily seeking green certification or LEED certification, you can certainly look at all the strategies that can gain points. So I listed those different categories of LEED, and they have to do with, you know, site design, water design, energy and efficient or atmosphere, materials, and indoor environmental quality, as well as innovation. So under those headings, you can see a number of different strategies that could be incorporated. They all come with different points, so you could either have your own point total for what you do on site, just like you're seeing what it might be if you were seeking, you know, what the point total would be if you were seeking LEED certification. And then there's certification at several levels, you know, silver, gold, and platinum. So you can kind of keep scoring your own. I would say that, that's not, sometimes the word LEED equivalent is used, but you kind of need to really get the LEED certification. And I realized that you wouldn't necessarily want to do that. You have to provide a lot of paperwork and proving all of that. But I think you could kind of keep a pretty good summary of the effectiveness of what you're doing just by using a LEED checklist and going down the various strategies underneath those different headings.
Great. Thanks for sharing that, Paul. I appreciate that. So we had a comment. Anna Maria, do you want to talk about the kind of reused items for planter beds and building gardens, compost building gardens and things like that you'd mentioned?
Yeah, both at our farm and when I was working at the Outdoor Education Center, anytime there is leftover materials, we kind of hoard them, but really they're always amazing resources to go into building out gardens and building out composting systems, greenhouses. So if you have any intention of creating those kind of that kind of infrastructure on site, those leftover materials are often invaluable, and what a great way to reuse a lot of that. For Katie, who asked involving campers or students in sustainability activities, when I was at the Boy Scout camp, we did a lot of amazing integrations with our campers in terms of sustainable and permaculture practices. And so one great example that comes to mind is we had a really big composting system that we put in, and we had the campers actively distribute their food after each meal into the separate composting bins. And there was a lot of signage all over the site about what kinds of ingredients go into compost. We also did tree planting days or harvesting days. There was also activities around rainwater harvesting. If there was a rainstorm and the campers were stuck inside, we were able to demonstrate either by looking out the window or doing activities inside, things on the water cycle and how to capture water. If you think of any kind of application in the permaculture practice, there's a way to integrate the campers. I'm trying to think of some other things. And Jared has a question. Do you have photos of your composting systems of the signs too? Yes, I can pull those up from when I was at the Outdoor Education Center. If you just send me your email in the chat box, I'm happy to forward those along with you. Yeah, Danny, do you remember anything else from the Outdoor Education Center?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Well, I think one of my favorite memories was putting in the bees, bringing the bees in and installing those hives, which was an introduction into beekeeping for me. But it was so fascinating. What a great educational opportunity, and important for the health of that ecosystem with all those the orchard out there as well.
Yeah, with our homeschool program, we had campers come. There were smaller groups, and they helped us harvest honey. They were not in the beehives, but I was able to take the honey out. We were able to extract it and jar it. That was a really fun activity for them as well. And of course, a great activity is planting seeds, planting native seeds or seeds in your garden. Especially, if you're doing landscape restoration or habitat restoration, that you have a lot of hands helping you to restore habitat and get those seeds planted. So
awesome. Thanks for sharing that, Anna Maria.
Sure.
So Katie, would you like to introduce yourself and just kind of talk a little bit more? I know that you've done some educational curriculum stuff as well, and I appreciate you sharing that question. Would you like to introduce yourself and talk a little bit more about sustainability activities?
Sure. Can you hear me?
Yes, I got you.
Great. Yeah, mostly the reason I asked that question is I'm always interested to know what people are doing around the country. So I'm Katie Measley. I'm here on the Oregon coast, and I'm a freelance outdoor educator and do staff training. And it's interesting to see how kids are involved in specifically composting and gardening programs, because there's such joy about digging in the dirt, and there's a program in Wisconsin where they have a soils class that would just be normal geology, but they go to their compost pile and look for invertebrates. And the kids are always like, ew, gross, we don't know, we don't want to dig in that dirt pile. And the minute one kid gets in there, everybody else is fascinated for most of the time. And they have to drag the students away. So sometimes those kind of resources could be used in a more unusual way. And then the other thing is, there are a couple of programs where they have sort of free choice blocks of time built in the day. And if you have the right staff member that can sell it, an energy audit can be really fun. There's a camp in Maine where they go around and rate the best drinking fountain on camp. And so the kids go and they rate it based on the, the temperature of the water and the taste of the water and the shade at the drinking fountain in question. And as they're doing it, they're talking about where does the water come from and how does that get filtered and what does it look like to put water back into the system, and looking at, rain gardens and stuff like that. Or doing like an energy audit where they go into the cabins, and if the trash is on the floor or if there's an impact outside, they dock cabins points and they give cabins points for turning their lights off. And so just having small groups of kids that are interested be involved in that way and start to feel like they are responsible for caretaking the impact the camp is having on the environment around them. So those are just some ideas and things that I've seen. I don't know if there are other folks who have things to share, if Danny, you've got another direction to take the call, but that's why I put the question out there.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks so much, Katie. Yeah, it's good to, we have a great diversity of folks on the call right now, and there's a lot of good information. That's kind of the point of this. This is a trial kind of thing to see how we can engage folks in this conversation. The composting is definitely picked up, and we've had a lot of interest in the photos and such. Green Camps put on a webinar several years ago called I Can Compost and So Can You. We worked with the U.S. Composting Council, a couple other, the Camp Stevens was on there, YMCA Camp Frost. And so I'll share that webinar as well to give you examples of those two camps, as well as some other composting education. But it sounds like composting is a pretty strong interest of the area, along with signage. I think signage is one of the most powerful education tools, where we can put a learner in front of the information that they need to bring in, kind of consider and process that information and make a decision on their own. So what a powerful thing to be able to share that signage. So we love getting examples of what camps are doing to share those signs there. So we'll continue with this down this line. So Kaylee, I believe Kaylee Tomlinson, had a comment about how you're mashing green compost materials. Would you like to introduce yourself and share more about that?
Hi everyone, my name is Callie and I work at the Nebraska 4-H camps. One of the things that we do with our campers is we allow them to collect all the compost in 5-gallon buckets, or the compost green stuff, and then we give them something to mash that stuff up with to break it down a little bit. Last year, the tool that we used wasn't exactly kid friendly. It was a old cleaver, not kid friendly. But this year we're looking to update that with a tool that other people might be using to. It kind of looks like an ice masher, I think, so that we can mash those up without having the kids use a tool that's not exactly safe. But we talked to them about it and why we're mashing it up and why we're doing this for our camp, and so that they can see our compost bins, they can see our garden right next to our compost bin. The thing that we are going to start, that we are doing this year, is throwing up that sign, so that if myself or our camp director isn't necessarily available to talk to through the kids through this education, that our frontline staff will be able to talk through the compost process and why we're doing it.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing that. Yeah, man, there's so many, there's not really one simple model or solution that we can all follow, even when it comes to composting. I think there's a lot of baseline practices that we can implement. But it's really about understanding, what system's going to work best for you. So this is really helpful. So thanks for sharing kind of your approach to that. And hopefully everyone can take some gems away and stick it in your satchel of wisdom, if you will, to implement back at your camp or program. So moving on to another compost question from Jared. Any issues with bears? Jared, I know in the call with, I think it was the SIIC call, I think this had come up again as well. I'd love to hear from other folks about bear composting. I do have a resource as well that I can share with some information about composting with bears. But Jared, can you share a little bit more about that? Have you tried composting and actually seen the bears coming up in there? How has that been for you?
Hey, we have not tried composting yet, unfortunately, but we are definitely in bear country, and we do get bears. And we had recycling bins out last year throughout camp, and that attracted some bears, through the main campus. Granted that everyone's supposed to rinse out and all that, but that doesn't happen all the time. And my concern with composting is attracting a bear, and where would we do it? And even with bees, like, where are your beehives? Are you getting bears to them? Do you have it on top of a roof somewhere, or a big fencing system for that? So that's just my question.
Great. Yeah. Anybody have any thoughts on the bears? I know for the beekeeping example, that was in Southern California, kind of close to the coast. So bears weren't really much of an issue. But does anyone have comments?
Yeah, I can offer. Typically composting, if it's done correctly in the sense that there's the right balance of the greens and brown material, you're encouraging decomposition, which does not attract animals, rodents, bears, raccoons, etc. When the composting system is out of balance, then it goes into decay and rotting, which is when you start to attract other wildlife. And there are other systems for composting that you can build that have a little bit more, just like protection. There could be a stronger lock, or there's some different stronger materials, so it's not necessarily just made out of some old pallets like a lot of systems are. So technically, again, when done appropriately, it should not have any smell. It should not be attracting any animals. And for bees, there is specific fencing that you can put around your beehives if you are in bear country that works exceptionally well at preventing them from getting into your hives. Now, beehives, if you place them on your camp, they should never be near camp beds or near staff housing or camper housing. The beehives are usually on the outskirt of the property just to ensure safety for everyone, in case that someone happens to walk by the beehive, that sort of thing. So it's usually further away on the outskirt of camp. And again, you can have specific fencing if you're in bear country. So I hope that is helpful.
Awesome.
Yeah,
Thanks.
I guess, just with that, the fencing stops them from getting to the beehive, but it's still, the bears are still coming to the area, right?
Yes, I don't know how saturated you are with bears, but if the bears are hungry and if there's not enough food for them, they could possibly come looking for food to the beehives. But that's more of a conversation on knowing what's around you in your environment. What is the population in your area? If you're heavily concentrated, if there's a large population, would incorporate beehives just to ensure that you're not luring them into camp. So it's just understanding your local environment. And more than not, though, bears aren't, they have enough food where they're at in the wild that they shouldn't be necessarily coming to.
Great, thanks.
Awesome. All right, thanks for those great questions. So it is 11:55. We got about 5 minutes left in our time. Again, as I mentioned before, we can continue on. I kind of want to go ahead, those of you that have other obligations, to move on from here. I want to kind of do a little closing, but then we can open the conversation up. Again, I know we've gotten a couple other questions in, but generally speaking, it sounds like composting is a really big interest to folks. And I think it's a great one. It's very visible. It's something that we can highlight at our camps. It takes time and energy to build these systems. My biggest advice is start really small. Don't dig a 20-foot trench and start composting, trying to compost all your food waste. I know we had a question about the balance of carbon and nitrogen ratios when we're putting things in our compost. If you start really, really big, it's really hard to balance that. And kind of going back to the point about bears, if you maintain your system really well, and not just bears, but critters as well. Our time when I was on Catalina Island, we had squirrels and that were kind of going into our compost system. So we're like, other pests and wildlife can be really challenging to manage. But if you start small, you can begin to learn what systems work best for you, what are the challenges that you're going to face, so that you can build your system gradually and understand how to better manage that system. And so if you're pulling waste from your dining hall, maybe don't worry about trying to divert 100% of your food waste in your first year of doing the compost, your first summer. Start small with just vegetable scraps, or maybe just things from the kitchen, and build that process up. So let me just share a couple slides here. Let me go through this to kind of close up. So call to action. So I think that, again, we see that there's a clear interest in sustainability from the camp community. And thank you again for everybody joining us today. And there are a lot of folks that weren't able to make it, but we want to continue this process and getting feedback to understand how green camps can organize and support the community around the sustainable camps movement. So the first thing that I'm going to challenge you to do is form your green team. We want to continue having these conversations as a larger community, but I encourage you to take that conversation back to your team. So I will share a document among a lot of other things that we're going to share as a result of this conversation that overviews and outlines kind of the steps to bring your green team together, get it formalized, invite different members onto your team, and sit down and have that conversation. I'd also like to offer, Green Camps does consulting services to help camps more one-on-one as possible. But that's not always accessible for camps. And so we're trying to put resources together like this document to support you. But since a lot of us are working from home these days with everything going on, I'd love to volunteer to set up a Zoom call with your staff. So if you are interested in bringing me in to do a Zoom call and lead a conversation and get your green team started, I'd love to jump on and learn about that. So you can email me or connect with me later. I'll follow up again in the email about that to set up a session for that. The second thing I'm asking is complete the follow-up survey. Your feedback is going to be really valuable to help understand the needs and the desires of future conference calls. Again, it sounds like composting is a strong area of interest. I will share the webinar that we've done previously, but maybe this is an opportunity to really focus some of the topics of these calls. Sometimes it's good just to have an open dialogue, because that's what brings up the topics and issues that camps are most interested in. So we want to play with that. Again, we want to continue working and growing this format to make this a regular resource and opportunity to connect with you and other camp and sustainability professionals there. And finally, again, all about joining the conversation, spreading more awareness about what we're doing. I encourage you to participate in future calls as we schedule those. Follow us on social media at Go Green Camps. We're on Facebook, a little bit of Twitter, Instagram. Facebook's kind of our primary focus right now, but please jump on there. I know Ana Maria and Lucian shared kind of their information as well for their social media stuff. So jump on and connect with these, with our organization, other organizations that can provide you tools and resources and information to support your efforts. I'd also love to invite folks to be a guest writer on our blog, as well as potentially participating in a Facebook Live interview. Again, let's share this information. Let's communicate to the rest of the camp community that there are huge opportunities available. for camps to benefit from accessing sustainability in the so many ways that we're aware of. And finally, the Green Camps community. We won a grant about a year or so ago from a foundation in New York, and we've built an online resource. We'll be announcing the next iteration of that soon. And we are a membership-based organization, and so we encourage both individuals and organizations to join to access the green community. One of the primary features of the green community is the ability to access resources. So all these things that we're talking about and sharing pictures of signage, the webinars of compost systems, we want to be able to house all those resources in one area. So when you type in the search bar, compost, how do I compost, or how do I combat wildlife from getting into my compost, you'll see a list of different forum subjects. You'll see webinars and videos, as well as articles around those ideas. The other aspect of the community is to facilitate those 5 steps of certification. So when you log in there, it will guide you through the steps of completing certification, so that if getting your camp certified, if you see value in that and being able to put that stamp of approval on there to say, hey, we've made a commitment to sustainability, and we've completed certification in order to build a framework to move our efforts forward there. So those are some things that I'd love to call to action to see what you can do with that. And again, let Green Camps, let us know how we can be of support for you, and let's build this community around what we're doing. So with that, again, if you have other obligations and you need to step away, I totally understand, but we do invite folks to kind of stick around and see if you have any other things to share. So I know Emma had made a comment about audits and something about your water fountains. A lot of our kids already rate our fountains. Emma, are you still with us? Would you be willing to introduce yourself and share what you're talking about there?
Yes, I am. So it's just kind of a funny thing that we do, but we are a pretty rustic camp, so we don't really have a lot of like we don't have water fountains per se, like what you think of in a school. All of our water is a well system, and it's just gravity fed through piping across the camp. But so that kind of makes it easy. Like we've in the past couple of years added just like spigots, kind of like how you have your hose set up at home. And like so the kids will rate those because like, you know, kind of how she was saying, you know, like shading, stuff like that affects a lot of our water because the piping is black. So if it's really sunny and it's in a sunny area, the water will be really hot. So we have one faucet in particular that some kids think it's the best water. Some kids think it's the worst water. Half of our camp is convinced it tastes like raspberries. I think it's terrible. I think it's the worst one, but they think it tastes like raspberries, so that's adorable. We have another one that's in a really sunny area, so if it's been hot for a couple of days, they'll ask if they can have tea packets, and they'll make tea because it's pretty warm coming out of that faucet. So it's just like cute little things like that. So they're already, you know, I mean, it's nothing super special, but they're thinking about like where the water comes from. Is it in a sunny area? Stuff like that.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing, Emma. Appreciate that. Always fun to have those little stories and share that stuff. It's really exciting. So it looks like we're getting kind of to the bottom of our questions there. So Anna Maria, I know that you we're going to connect with Dan to address this question, but do you want to speak a little bit about the right balance for compost?
Hi, I'm here. Yes, so the right balance is a right balance of greens and browns, so carbon and nitrogen materials. And if we think of the forest is a place where decomposition is naturally happening. And the forest is the place where decomposition is naturally happening, and in the forest we have the materials of carbon and nitrogen. And in the natural state, it goes to decomposition, which when you pick up a handful of soil from the forest, it feels really light and fluffy. It's really dark and it doesn't smell like rotting. If you think of a pile of rotting material, you can tell that it has a funk to it. It's smelly. It could be wet. And that is an imbalance of the carbon and nitrogen material. So in order to achieve the right balance, as you're adding material, you're always adding both green and brown. So adding the wet material, which would be food waste, and then balancing out with drier materials such as leaves or cardboard or newspaper or whatever you have around. That's sort of like the very basic fundamental. It's more, as you start with compost, as Danny mentioned, it's really the best idea is to start small, get a hang of the process, and then you can build out your systems to accommodate more food waste. And in the beginning, it's really visual. You're smelling, you're touching, you're using your sight and smell senses to kind of intuitively learn how to compost. And then from there, you can start to incorporate other tools like thermometers to get the right temperature. And also, then you can explore different kinds of systems which house the composting. So what kind of materials you're using, etc. So that's sort of the very, very basic fundamentals, but Danny has a lot of great resources on composting that we can follow up with to help you.
Awesome. Thanks, Ana Maria. Excellent, excellent. Well, that reaches the bottom of our questions. I'll give folks a minute or so if you want to pose any questions, or if you just want to introduce yourself and tell us about your camp and your efforts. We'd love to hear from you. All right. Well, again, thanks everyone for joining us today. We really appreciate your time and efforts and what you're doing back in your camp community. It really does take a champion to lead this movement, and we hope that this process and these calls and the resources that we share will help support your efforts in that area. Expect a follow-up email probably tomorrow with access to these resources that we discussed. We'll go through. We'll also share some of the comments from the chat box, as well as, again, access to those resources to support your efforts. So thank you again, everybody, for joining us. I hope you have a great rest of the day and a good weekend, and going through these challenging times with the social distancing, but glad you could all join us today. So thank you so much, and have a wonderful rest of the day.